Hello, it's Blue coming to you live from the Sorbonne. Another week and another top cut interview for you lovely folks, and boy is this a special one. First off, excuse my more nasally voice than normal. I'm a little bit sick, and it shows up in the interview as well. Anyway, today with us we have Pandanaconda, the first among us to pilot the Bravos hero of Basira and Kaizamon to the top cut and even a round further to the top 8. We learn about their multiple talents outside of just fancy cardboard. Definitely do not divulge any early altered playtesting secrets, and even our hopes for new heroes to also make their way to the top. This is a good one, folks, so be sure to watch all the way through and tell me your thoughts in the comments. Enjoy! Hello, everyone. Today we have a new Bravos player that had made the top cut in Paris Ludtrotter event. Pandanaconda. First, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell me a bit how you got into Altered.
Okay, so hello, my name is Piero, aka Pandanaconda. I'm both a computer scientist on one side and an actor slash classical singer on the other side. I come from the Magic the Gathering competitive scene, and I've played that for many, many years. And 1 year ago, I was recruited by a friend who was working at Equinox, and they recruited me to be member of the playtesting team. So we did some balancing 1 year ago, obviously very different from the cards that have been released, but that got me into the game. Then when I stopped that, I stopped playing, and a few weeks, like 2 weeks ago, I received some cards from them, and I decided to get back into the game.
Nice. Yeah, I had seen through the Melee site that you had been involved in some Magic tournaments as well, so I figured you had some experience there. It's always interesting to see the people who have experience in other like competitive TCGs in general, and then obviously you have even more with like actual playtesting too, right? So, and seeing those people do well in general, even what you said, 2 weeks worth of practice for it, right? So pretty crazy. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, the event you participated in was the second biggest event held in France, and honestly, because of how big it is in Europe, it's probably the second biggest in the world at this point. Um, what was that experience like being there compared to like other Magic events you've been to or any other TCG events? And obviously, it wasn't your first event, so yeah, just let me know how you felt about the event as a whole.
It was, and I don't mean this as a bad thing, it was a lot more casual than most of the recent MTG events I've been at. Ever since the COVID, things have been split a bit between the casual side of things, the gathering part of things, and the competition. And the MTG events I attend tend to be very, very straight competitions. And this was more casual, a lot of players coming for fun, which is felt in the metagame and the decks that people play. We'll probably get back to that at some point. And it was actually quite well run. Um, I have to admit, it was a very big convention, lots of Pokemon TCG or Lorcana and lots of things. And the event ran rather smoothly. It started like 10 to 15 minutes late. We had very, very few hiccups, and everything was smooth. The judge team was present. So I gotta say, it was quite good.
Yeah, for sure. And that kind of gets into like my next question in general. Obviously, you said you just picked this game back up a few weeks ago, kind of thing, after playtesting it earlier last year. Um, as far as like the comparison to Angers, I was obviously only able to see like the streamed online difference between the tournament. It definitely seemed it picked up a little bit better as far as how things were run for this event compared to the Angers event. Um, but as far as like updates or changes or things that you want to see for future events that you might be competing in for Altered, is there anything you'd like to see in particular?
So the few hiccups I could mention, the first one was I couldn't hear or at least understand a word that was being said on microphone. And that's a thing at TCG events. You're in a big hall and there is a lot of echo and reverberation. but I couldn't understand basically anything said, and there were some very important information being said, like it's going to be a top 16, not a top 8, and I had to gather that from some players. It was like a rumor, and that was really important because that meant I could draw my last match into top 16. And then there was a communication issue. At least I heard that one. We were supposed to have a lunch break, and this one got cancelled over the microphone. And some players went for lunch and came back with a game loss, which I think is the saddest failure of the event because that ruined some people's tourney. But other than that, it was rather really well run. And I was not in Angers. I was not playing yet
Yeah,
back in Angers. Um, but yeah, and another thing was Equinox helped support the event, I believe, and at least the rewards for the players were really, really good. Basically, you had your worth of um, like the entry fee was covered by your participation rewards, and then everything you got on top of that was just bonus. And it was not bad rewards. It was just straight up cards and booster packs and a playmat. But I found that to be like something you see in newer games, Flesh and Blood, Lorcana, and lacking once the game gets older after a few years, or MTG, lacking the draw for new players.
I gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. It's interesting hearing some of that comparison to what you're talking about as far as like the announcements and everything, because there was a little bit of that at Odgers as well. But for the most part, it seems like it was well run, and honestly, I'm kind of excited to see once Equinox is like doing their own events kind of thing. That's not supplementary to like a larger event necessarily. Um, Whether it be like with Ludo or whatever kind of thing, right? I'm sure they may still piggyback on some of those in the future, but as far as like having official events, right? So should be interesting to see and what they learn from it as a whole. But yeah, I mean, getting into the competition a little bit, um, meta is still being developed a little bit for Altered. Realistically, we still do see some new heroes, new decks make it into the top 16. Obviously, there is a dominant hero a little bit as far as what we've seen thus far, but we still occasionally see something a little bit different. The hero you played, for example, being one of them, I don't believe we have seen a any Bravos hero make it into the top cut for these major events, maybe some locals and that kind of stuff. But yeah, just tell us a little bit about why did you decide on the hero you picked, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so obviously I'll add that there was a 100 player event in Lyon in France, which was won by Kojo playing a
Oh, yeah.
Foundry, and many players might have missed that. So that was the first actual Bravos
Mhm.
performance. And for me, so in Magic the Gathering, I've been a huge hardened scales player, which uses a lot of dices to represent the same thing as boosts.
Mhm.
And this adds into combat math, which I love to actually perform and gives me an edge because I'm actually practiced at that. And because of that, during playtest 1 year ago, like, I've got non-disclosure agreements, but things I've played with were so long ago that I don't risk to to spoil anything. At some point, there was something close to Basira in playtesting, and I actually loved it. I might have gotten some cards nerfed, but 1 year ago, so those cards don't even exist anyways. But
Right.
I had a lot of fun with that, and when I opened the display like 2 weeks ago, I found some of the cards to be decent Bravos cards. I had two Havens, so I thought, hey, I'm not gonna get into something else. Let's first try to do my own deck because I find it much easier to brew your own deck in Altered because there are no bad cards than it is in some other TCGs where you have to actually follow like a net deck to know what cards are playable. So I went with my own list, decided not to net deck, and afterwards I looked at what people were doing and I saw that I was completely in the wrong playing Basira, but decided to go with it. I could have played like Waru with no uniques or just borrowed some random uniques. Thought that I wanted to prove that the meta was more open than people thought it was, and that my practice on the hero was more important than playing the hero that people wanted me to play.
I gotcha. Yeah, it's interesting. One of the things I was going to get to at some point is just your experience, obviously, with doing playtesting and how much, like you mentioned, like how much has actually changed at this point. Um, because like obviously it's changed considerably. I'd have to imagine. Um, and like you said, you got some cards banned that we probably don't even see at this point, right? But
You,
anyway, so one of the questions I had, as far as like you said, you mentioned you kind of just brewed your own deck, and then took a look at what other people are doing a little bit and decided to stick with it. I mean, just looking at your deck list in general, let me just pull it up here. Yeah, here we go. And like some surprising things in general for me, just from looking at it. One that sticks out, I guess, is like the Keylon cylinder as a permanent. Um, I assume that's just to be able to have like a consistent boost to trigger Basira then, or like what was your thought process around that?
so I have to get into a story. I'll make it short, but it's
Yeah.
like the best story about the tourney was so I'd been prepping for 1 week, asking some friends around if they had cards, and my uniques were basically just mystics. Like one of them was straight up 7/5/3 for 4 mana, and I love it. It's just great. But I was running that, and I get to the tourney, and there's this friend of mine, and he's still part of the play team. And one of his friends comes over and says, "What are you playing?" So I say, "I'm playing Basira, but my uniques are not good. I don't think I'll make it too far." And this guy, who I've never met before, just says, "Well, I've got this Foundry Armor on me. Just play it." And so that's the story of the tournaments. So he just gives me the cards, trusts me fully, and that's part of what's cool about having a more human. I don't know how to put it in English, but this friendly atmosphere of those tourneys and trusting, and he just gives me like the best unique I've ever seen, which you can see in the deck list. It's just a 3 mana armorer that has the perfect text: when any character gains a boost, create a Brassbug token. And I tell him I can't change my deck list. The deadline was yesterday at night, and he tells me, "Well, I think you can." So I go over to the judges, and they tell me, "Yeah, you've got 2 minutes." So I rush to the app, I get the armor in, I change my deck list, and then I kind of panic because it's so short. I have like 1 minute and 30 seconds left. So I just click around, and I want to bring in this other unique Chiron so that I get the infinite combo in the deck list. And so I have to grab another unique out of my deck, and then I have to understand why it's wrong. And it's because now I'm running 4 Chirons, so I have to cut another common Chiron, and I'm panicking. And I say, "Well, what if I don't have a common card to replace it with?" And I tell my friend Louis, uh, "I don't even have a Ratatosk." And he tells me, "Come on, you don't have a Ratatosk? Here, have one." And he has one on himself, and that's why there is one Ratatosk in the deck. It's because I had to make a last-minute cut. And the other change I made is the one you mentioned, Kellen Cylinder. Two of my uniques required me to have a landmark to be active. So I thought 3 heavens was too few, and I went up to 4 to be able to more consistently get the infinite combo going, and to get to proc my armor from the hand and get Basira to be active. That's something I can get back to quickly. Basira is going to get only better because right now there are few ways to trigger the hero power consistently every turn for cheap. But the more ways you have to do it, the better the hero power gets. Right now you get it like 2 turns out of 3, so it's just a very bad Sigismar. But once you get to consistently get Basira to walk towards the end of the turn cycle, it gets to be a godly Sigismar. And yeah, so that's why there is the Kellen cylinder, but I've changed my list a lot since, and I'm still running one, sometimes two Kellen cylinders because the card fits the purpose once you start playing those good uniques.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed. I mean, I saw the armor, and I'm like, oh boy, here it comes, the loop. Um, but Yeah, I hadn't noticed from the for the Chiron that it required a landmark, so that makes sense in general, just having a little bit more utility there. And then that whole story obviously is a bit interesting as far as the individual Ratatoskr. And then I even noticed like just one mana eruption as far as like the removal too. But you do have three intimidation, I guess, as well. So, um, but yeah. Anyway, talk a little bit more about that later if we need to. But yeah, as far as like the actual process of being at the tournament, making it through the Swiss rounds into the top cut. I mean, you kind of mentioned it was more of like a casual setup, um, and like you felt like it was a good community. Obviously, I mean, people are letting you borrow some pretty good cards in general. Um, what was that process like for you? Just like winning. I think you ended up going as far as your ending record, just going 8-1-1.
Um, I think it was 7-1-1, then
Yeah,
yeah, 8-1-1, and then 8-2-1 when I lost in
yeah,
quarterfinals. I was surprised to get this far, especially since I mentioned it was rather casual, but my round two opponent was Hiruyama, who went on to the finals. Then my round three opponent, or maybe four, but was Dundee, who also went to top 16. And, I was not lucky with the pairings early on and facing the one of Atsadi Surge in the room. I was just facing people playing Waru from the get-go. And I was really surprised to beat them every time because it was tough. Every match was tough, but that's what I like about the game. Most matches, except the one I lost where I got completely stomped. And yeah, I faced Genetic, who's like the Fen player who's in the top 20 on BGA. I faced him round three. That was really tough, and he was a very good player. I faced a few of the altered, no, exalted players. One of the altered aces. I didn't know what those were back then. And you asked me, if some matchups were difficult in the pre-interview, and yeah, pretty much all of them. Wahoo feels so hard every time. Fen is terrifying, but I do have a very good record against them. There was this one Afanas draw where I couldn't do anything. They just removed everything I did. So everything looked pretty hard, but in the end, I got lucky enough. And um, I, I will say I played rather sharp, which is not to boast, but just to say I'm happy with how I played it, and I'm happy that I got rewarded for it because that's what makes a great game is when you get rewarded for good play and you get punished for your mistakes. Well, at least to me.
yeah, I get it. Yeah, it's interesting. Obviously, you had not as much time to prepare as everyone else. You still ran into some hard matchups, and you were still able to come out with some wins, regardless of what is the perceived meta in general. So, yeah, I mean, just out of curiosity, how familiar, I know you did some early playtesting, but how familiar were you with like all of the cards that potentially could be in deck so that way you could like play around them and that kind of thing?
Um, so I'm not going to disclose anything, but so many cards changed that I recognized many things. Like I have some old playtest cards at my place, which I did not burn.
Yeah.
Uh, and some of them are really close to the cards we have now, but so many just have nothing to do with the actual cards. So at times it was more confusing than anything. And I just I'll say one thing. During playtesting, early playtesting, things moved very fast. The devs were going like crazy, changing so many things, trying so many things. And these devs have had so little time and such a hard task. So one thing I got from this playtesting was learning to build a good deck in 1 hour. Because every week I was presented with new cards and I had to build a deck to try and break the new cards. And we failed many times. We succeeded many times. Sometimes it was obvious something was too strong. Sometimes it took more testing. The task was really big, and I find it quite impressive how many risks they've taken, especially considering they had the whole unique thing to test. So I'm really impressed with what my old um, workmates I came up with. Obviously, we could discuss like the elephant in the room and start speaking about Waru, but more than that, I'm impressed with what they came up with. And yeah, I didn't remember any cards which came up as relevant, but I was trained to build a deck and learn to play it rather fast by this period.
Yeah, I was just kind of curious as far as like how much, like why I asked as far as like the relevant information kind of thing, and being similar enough seemed to be enough for you to be able to play throughout the entire tournament. So that's cool to hear. But yeah, I mean, as far as like the actual top cut itself, you already mentioned that you didn't expect to make it as far as you did, kind of thing, especially with the early round matchups of people that made it into the top cut themselves, kind of thing. Um, I guess just what was there anything that surprised you once you were there? I mean, I guess you weren't necessarily familiar entirely with like previous results. I mean, you mentioned the Kojo that made it in the 100-player event, but was there anything that surprised you once you got there? I know you ended up winning your first round and then losing in the top eight, but yeah, just go into that.
Mm, it was not too surprising. The player I lost to, so my top 16 match, I'll just touch a word on it because the player was very, very kind and fun. I don't know if you've interviewed him or if you will, Luca. I was playing Fen. It was a really fun match, and that's the match I was happiest with my play because I made some blunders, but that match was really cool for me to navigate around a cappella trainings and his cards. It was really, really fun. But there was no big surprise. Then I faced Etigma. That guy was top 16 at Angers. That guy was 10-0 in the day. He had not been able to draw because the first match the person couldn't ID, so he had to play and went on to 8-0, and then they played it, so he went to 9-0 in the rounds, first seed out of the Swiss cut, and he had he was top two in that Lyon. I mentioned Kojo won a tourney, and that tourney, the final was against Etigma, and this was the accomplishment for that player. Obviously, he went on to win the whole thing. And our match was very awkward for me because, my hands sometimes in Altered, your hand develops poorly, and if this adds up to your opponent being on, sleeping some Robin Hoods, then you don't get to play an actual match. And there was this very pivotal turn where we were even. We were getting to 70% of the game being over, and I thought if I play this Chiron on my right side and boost this creature, he can't win both sides. He has to give up one, and I'll advance the other. Then I will lose this card to his legate or whatever. And actually, his last cards were two one-drops, one rare Frog Prince and one Ordis Trooper, and this was the only combination that allowed me to beat me on both sides, and that snowballed into me getting stomped at the end of the game. But I wanted to be more of a surprise. I wanted to beat that guy and break the curse, but it's not just Woru winning the games, it's also that guy winning the games. And he's been winning a lot. And it's just not just his deck, it's also the player. And his play was sharper than all of the other players I faced on the day. I'm not going to be, too critical, but when I say it's casual, the actual level of play over the course of the day was quite much lower than I'm used to at an MTG competitive event. And that's fine. It's a very new game, so the play patterns are new. But this guy was playing very sharp, and all of us other players were making mistakes, playing things in the wrong order all the time. And I was the first to do those mistakes. So I think there is a lot of room for improvement for everyone out there. And it's not just that guy winning with Wahoo, it's also just this guy winning everything.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I actually did get to speak to him a little bit. And I mean, he did have good uniques, and it's funny that you mentioned like a rare Frog Prince and a rare Trooper because he still runs the two unique Frog Princes. So the idea that he hit the one cost rare Frog Prince to be able to
I
advance is
know.
funny. Um, uh, Bad luck on that one. But his unique
It's
Frog Princes are good too. Obviously, they can bait you into a lot of things. But Anyway, but yeah, no, he's one of the questions I asked him was like watching him on stream, he just seemed super confident in his play. That he even in like the mirror matchup, he felt confident in it, and um, he it almost seemed like he knew he was gonna win, even if he was behind on the tumult, right? So interesting that you would say that, like where it's like it's not just a hero, it's not just Robin Hood, it's not just anything like that, right? It still takes a person to be able to pilot it, because
Mm,
otherwise we'd see nothing but warriors in the top cut, right? So
mm.
anyway, getting past that, you kind of went into this a little bit already, as far as like things to work on and everything like that. But do you have any advice, especially as like someone who has a lot of experience in TCGs, obviously playtesting and everything like that, for anyone that wants to play competitively and replicate your success?
Yeah, so I'm not going to focus too much on the competitiveness, but in a sense, I will. My advice is mostly to have fun and not get not get sad over the stats of the top eight and stuff, because they tell a story, but the story of the event was like Wahoo was 12% of the room. 88% of the players chose to play something else. The most played deck was Sigismar. And I faced 5 Wahoos out of 10 matches, or 11 matches. That was a lot, but most players faced it once or not even once in the day. And if you go to your local event, 16 players, 32 players, chances are people are not playing that. And people all are playing their Tejas or Crests and fans and whatnot, or even some much fancier stuff. So just have fun. And if you can take that from me, um, it looked like Basira was not competitive, but I had a decent list. I was lent one crazy good unique, but ask around, everyone might have one very good unique and not even realize. Lend it to some friend, get something decent. But it's easy to have fun right now, and if you're not having fun with Wahoo, it's not the only thing that's there. Even on BGA, I face Wahoo maybe once in 3 or 4 matches, no more than that. And I think there is a lot more to explore. And I know, like, I know some things are unexplored. I don't have the means to explore everything, but I'm sure Arjun and Spike is completely unexplored and has a lot of potential. I know that Festival is a crazy card, and that the person with access to the right uniques might do something crazy with that. Some people are speaking of Nevenka being a very good hero, and Nevenka's hero power is really strong. It's just very strong compared to Basira's, for instance. There are so many things to explore. So um, just have fun. Before the tourney, some friend told me it's not just WoW. There are at least 7 heroes you could top 8 with. And actually, I made at least 8 heroes by adding one. And I think many people could add a ninth, 10th, 11th hero to the list. And yeah, have fun. The game is fun, and the match are mostly all interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned like some heroes like Argent and Spike and whoever else kind of thing. I know I've talked to a bunch of people about it, and I mean, for example, like at locals I go to, I play a different deck every week, kind of thing, just to be able to play it, because otherwise it would just get boring in my mind to just like constantly play the same thing and just build on that. And if I'm winning a bunch, like I just like messing around and testing a variety of different things. I know the big thing now is the um, Akeisha deck that has Celebration Day and just stalls completely kind of thing. You get some nice 30-40 minute matches that way. Um, but yeah, it's interesting that you would say that, and I think it's the main thing overall. And it contributes to like the community that you mentioned into in general, like the teams, like Altered Aces, Exalts, where I know they work together and they share uniques and they make things. I mean, they help them play well competitively. I mean, they've had multiple players win events at this point, right? So um, cool to hear. But yeah, I mean, past that, obviously, you just got back into Altered after playtesting a while ago. You have any future plans as far as Altered's concerned?
Um, yeah, right now I'm still playing on BGA. I might do some local tourneys. If something big comes up, I want to be like at least ready because the game is fun and I think it's easy to keep in touch with the community. If an opportunity shows up to like talk with the team again and give them my feedback or anything, that was some of the most interesting things I've done TCG wise. Playtesting. It was so much fun. That's what got me to do these tourneys and try again. Because yeah, I had a lot of fun doing that, and I don't know where I'll be in a week regarding Altered. I just think it's a good game. It's different from most of the TCGs I've played. It has some vibes from Gwent or stuff like that, if people are acquainted with those. But it's quite different from all the other TCGs, and in a way that I like a lot more than Flesh and Blood. I barely played, but it feels like you do get an incremental advantage in one way or the other, but it's a lot step by step, and things clear very often. In Altered, you actually do build up your mana orbs, your permanence, and a lead in a pace that I really do appreciate a lot. So I think it's a good game, and I'll be around in one way or another.
For sure. But yeah, that's all I had for you. Interesting talk. Learned some things that I didn't expect to learn about you and about your experience with the game and TCGs as a whole. So it's good talking to you. Appreciate the time. Everyone else that appreciated the video, feel free to like, subscribe, and play new heroes that can potentially win in general. But yeah, after that, have a good rest of your day and catch you later.